So I love apple pie, but it's always kind of it's a little bulky to eat. So I've decided I want to make apple pie cookies. So that requires me to cook the filling first, because you can't cook it and maintain a cookie. Won't be in a pie plate. Anyway, so here's how we start. We have 1/4 cup of butter that I'm going to melt in this saucepan over medium heat. That's a 1/2 stick. And once that's melted, we will add our apples and sugars and all our spices. So my butter is melted. So now I have 5 apples. They were tiny apples that we cut and into tiny, tiny pieces, because we want them to be able to, once they cook down, be able to use as a filling for just a cookie. When I make a pie, I want those big, thick pieces of apple, but in a cookie, you need them to be much smaller. So we're going to coat those in the butter. Just like that. Now I'm going to add 1/4 cup of sugar, a 1/2 cup of brown sugar. I'm going to mix those together. I have 1.5 teaspoons of lemon juice. I have a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, I have a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon of allspice, 1/8 teaspoon of cloves, and 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla. Now we're just going to stir all this together. And we're going to let this cook for about 5 minutes so that the apples can become soft and they can reduce in size. So now that it's all stirred together, we're going to give this about 5 minutes and then we'll come back. So our apples have been cooking for about 5 minutes. And now we need to thicken up that sauce, because if you leave it in this very liquid state, it'll seep out when it cooks, when we bake them in the oven. So all I'm going to do is take 2 tablespoons of water, and a tablespoon of cornstarch, and I'm going to make a slurry. Now the reason that we dissolve the cornstarch in water first is so you don't get chunks of cornstarch in your pie filling. So we have to make sure that we break it all up. If you'll notice, it gets into chunks like that. We want to dissolve it to make sure that there aren't any chunks like that. And once we can spoon through it just like liquid, we're going to pour it in. And then we will stir this and let it cook for another 5 minutes until it thickens up. So our apples have been cooking with that cornstarch for about 5 minutes, and they are thick, just like I wanted them, not soupy. Now we're going to turn the heat off. I'm going to remove these from the heat and let them sit on the counter for about 20 minutes. You want them to cool down, so if at 20 minutes it's not cool enough for you to handle with your hands, let it cool some more. And then we'll be back to make the actual cookies. Okay, so once your apple pie filling is cool, you're going to take your pie crust. Now, I made my regular homemade pie crust that I make for everything. If you buy pie crust, it's the same concept, just roll it out. So I've preheated my oven to 350 degrees. Now I'm going to roll out my dough in 2 sections. You'll need, if you buy pie dough, you need 4 sheets. I'm going to use my 2 because I make bigger. Okay, I'm going to roll out the first one. I'm going to take my half of my apple pie filling and I'm going to spread it over the top. Kind of spread it out as much as you can. Then I'm going to take the other half of my pie crust and I'm going to roll it out as well. And this one I'm going to cut into strips. So let's cut off all the chunky pieces on the outer edge that are not straight. And then I need about a half an inch, maybe a quarter of an inch. I'm going to create a lattice over this whole thing. So make sure you can see. Like this. Then I take this one and it goes over. And this one will go over here. And then we'll take one and have it go the other way over. This one up and under, over. We'll just keep on like this. You want to get them close together, a little closer than what I have. So we're going to keep up with the lattice until we've covered the entire amount of pie or pie filling that we have here. And then we'll cut out our cookies. So I finished the lattice on all of my, or the half of my apples that I have. So now I'm going to take my round cookie cutter and I'm going to cut circles. Now what this is going to do two things. The first is it's going to give you that round shape, but it is also going to seal in the two pie crusts so that they don't come apart when we bake them. So we're going to put them just like that. So this gave us about 8 little apple pie cookies for this half. And we're going to bake these in a 350-degree oven for 25 minutes. And then I'm also going to cook these little scraps, but I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. First we're going to make the big cookies. So I'm going to cut off any usable pie crust that I have left because I'm going to re-roll for my next round. But the stuff that already has apples and that cinnamon goo, we're just going to cut into small pieces like this and put them on our parchment lined cookie sheet. We'll bake these next time around. They'll still taste good, they're just not as pretty. So our apple pie cookies took about 25 minutes to cook. I wanted to make sure that the crust was golden brown and it was cooked all the way through. And here are our cookies and here are our scraps.